remember when Superman fought the Incredible Hulk? Or when Batman teamed up with Daredevil and Spider-Man to take down crime? Well, DC and Marvel just announced they are reprinting their classic crossover collections into two oversized hardcovers. Now, the DC vs. Marvel Omnibus and DC vs. Marvel The Amalgam Age are both available for pre-order right now at Organic Price Books. So if you want to learn about Dark Claw or the original Spider-Boy, go ahead and place your pre-order. You'll get over 30% off and you'll save $2 every time with code BJKicks at checkout. Just visit comicsaredope.com/crossover. That's comicsaredope.com/crossover. Welcome back to Comics Are Dope, the podcast. I'm your host, BJ Kicks, and this episode is special, as is every episode. But back in 2020, when I started the channel, I had just recently gotten into collecting Milestone comics, and I had just recently sort of learned about the Dakota universe. I knew who Static was, but I didn't even realize he was a comic character. And so I'm feverishly hunting down back issues on eBay. This is, during the pandemic. And I just loved it. There's not really a way to describe my attachment to Milestone. But in the middle of me documenting my Milestone collection journey, DC announced in 2020, maybe early 2021, that they were bringing back Milestone. And that was really, really exciting for me. So exciting, in fact, that I jumped on YouTube and did a quick recap of the press release and what I was excited about, including these new character designs for Static from this new artist named Nikolas Draper-Ivey. One of the cool things that happened from that video was Dennis Cowan reached out just expressing support or thanks for me showing support. And so did this new artist, Nikolas Draper-Ivey. And we have been building a rapport together ever since. And this conversation is very much the result of that rapport we've been building. And for a minute, this is just going to sound like us just playing around. I promise this is a professional interview. But we did finally get to sit for this interview that we've been putting off for a minute about Nick's journey trying to build a career out of sequential art, his anime influences, some of his favorite anime shows. We talk a lot about just what went into season 1 of Static, the sort of growing pains learning to create for an American comics company on, a monthly deadline and things like that. We talk about his approach for Shadows of Dakota, where he kind of got promoted to co-writer, if you will. And of course, we talk about what's coming next. So I hope you enjoy this extra double-sized anniversary issue of Comics Are Dope, the podcast. And without further ado, here's me conducting the interview. All right, guys. Well, if you know me, you know why this interview is special to me. I didn't even bring any notes because we're just going to have a really fun conversation, but I should introduce my next guest. If you read the title, you know who I'm talking to. You probably know him as the artist who sort of reimagined Static for a new generation. He's been drawing and writing on Static for like the last 3 years. And we're here to talk about that, as well as some of the things that came before and what things are coming next. So welcome to the writer and artist of Static, Shadows of Dakota, and the most swole artist I know, Nikolas Draper-Ivey.
Hello. What's up, Brad?
What's going on, man? All right. So first question, where does your love for fitness come from? Because it's no joke. Like, it's you, Doug Mankey, and Greg Capullo, but like, and Jim Lee's pretty fit as well, but you just kind of take it to a different level. Like, where does that come from?
It's really funny. I remember, like, I think it was when the Black Panther trailer first dropped. I already had my locks growing at the time, and my hair was kind of already starting to do that kind of the Killmonger thing. Before we had even seen the previews of that movie, and the trailer dropped, and I saw that trailer. We all did, And I remember seeing like Michael B standing in front of like that fire, and I was just like, whoa. And there was a thought that crossed my mind of like, oh, I was looking at my hair. I was like, man, I should try to like cosplay, you
Mhm.
know. But then I was like, I've never actually lifted a dumbbell before. What would happen? And that was kind of that was the driving force of like, well, what would happen if I did? What would happen if I actually tried to commit to going to the gym? And I did that and I worked out and I kept doing it. And then it just became like a habit. Like I had
Mhm.
been too deep. Like once I started seeing the results, it was less about the cosplay thing. It became like just a lifestyle choice. And it was just like,
Mhm.
oh, just keep going. And that was pretty much it. And then it was, you know, trying to maintain it. And it was like, oh, okay, I like this. And then, you know, naturally when you start to get in shape, people start to kind of pay attention, women start to kind of pay attention. And then,
Mhm.
I won't go into that. But
Right.
that's been a great motivator. But that's not why I do it. That's not why.
Right.
The real reason is you're spending so much time working and
Mhm.
sitting behind a desk and you're constantly drawing, you're constantly doing that. A lot of these, artists you hear about, they'll work themselves, they don't take care of themselves.
Mhm.
And that's something that I try to make a point of doing is like, okay, even though I'm going to do my work, I need to make sure I go to the gym and like try to be healthy,
Yeah.
and so I have some kind of staying power. And that's really much the drive. That's pretty much like what I do. Um, yeah, this is really good discipline to do that, to exercise and to try to stay active and loosen up because you sit behind a desk for hours.
For sure.
Yeah.
So is working out how you start your day or how you'd rather end it?
Oh no, that's usually first thing in the morning.
Got
Like I
it.
wake up, and I get my like oatmeal,
Mhm.
protein shake, all that type of stuff. And then I get ready to go to the gym. Yeah.
Bet. Bet. Well, look, this isn't a fitness podcast. I just had to get that one out of the way. But nah, man. So for those who maybe don't know you or don't know much of your work, right? Like the way the story is told, you are an artist that was plucked out of relative obscurity to draw static for the return of Milestone back in 2020. But I want to know a little bit more about like the things that came before that, right?
Hmm.
For those who have not seen either Static Season 1 or Shadows of Dakota, or just any of Nick's art online, right? Like your style, Reggie Hudlin calls it Afro anime. I think on your website, you called it an Afro Asian style. It's very Eastern influence. It's very manga influenced. And I mean, even now, the way you're working digitally, like it just looks like straight up animation, which is dope.
There's a reason
But
for that. But thank you.
no problem. But so what I want to know though is just where does that influence really come from? How did you sort of fall in love with that art style and decide to do it yourself?
Oh man. Well, if you're going way back,
Mm,
like originally I worked traditionally and I still do traditional work from time to time, but I've been so busy that I like have to work digitally. Like
mm,
it's just too much. There's too many things. Um, but in doing that, the only reason I wasn't working digitally at the time is because I like didn't afford like a Cintiq and all the
mm,
bells and whistles that come with working digitally. I didn't have an iPad. All I had was like my Copic markers and watercolor, and that still is like some of my strongest stuff. I feel, and
mm,
I'm able to go back to that. I always enjoy it, but there is a certain aesthetic that I've always chased after, and I've wanted from my work when it comes to working digitally, and
mm,
it is making it look like the animation that I would see growing up. Like I was a big fan of like Madhouse and like Studio 4C and all that cool like anime and stuff.
mm,
And I always wanted my stuff to look like that, Man Globe, your Samurai Champloo, Ergo Proxy type of thing. Like I've always liked that kind of style. So
mm,
it was like, oh man, I with the iPad, I can try to get some of that in my work. And I think in some areas, I feel like I was successful at it. In some areas, if I had more time, you know, like I wasn't able to pull it off. But for the most part, that was usually the goal of like, if I can make my stuff look animation ready, you know, it almost works as like a blueprint. Like someone, you know, some people are like, oh, this kind of looks like storyboards. That's on purpose.
Right.
It's meant to look like cinematic. So that way when things are being animated or when people are trying to find a reference point, you know, not confirming anything, not confirming anything, but I'm just saying, they'll have something to look at, you know, and that was kind of like the drive. But the thing is, there was a reason. I wouldn't say it was like relative obscurity. Like I was doing another project. I finished that project, and then I got brought on to do another project with Reggie, few, you know, well-known characters. And then from that, it was kind of like, oh, well, you know what? Maybe he should do, you know, Static. But then I guess Dennis had reached out to me because I did a design, like my own take on Static. And it was like a very anime take on him. And I saw that. And then that's what brought me in. And that's what got me the job.
Got you. So you said you were involved with Reggie Hudlin prior to Milestone coming up.
Yes, but I can't say about what it was.
Got it.
Can say that we did know each other before that. There was something else that I was involved in, and that led to me doing something else. Like,
got you.
Yeah.
Got you. So when you talk about your anime influences, right, like you're bringing up deep cuts, right? So I don't know how old you are. I'm 33. I'm one of the kids that was watching
slightly younger than you, but I'm around that same age.
Okay. Slightly. Got you. So yeah. I'm one of the kids that was watching Toonami, right? And Gundam Wing, for whatever, didn't necessarily appeal to me in the way that Dragon Ball Z did. I watched Dragon Ball Z, and that was kind of it. By the time, you know, all the other stuff was hitting the airwaves, I had kind of aged out of cartoons, and I was on to like watching BET, MTV all day, which is terrible for you, right? But what was the gateway for you? And because I'm like, you're naming stuff that I've never heard of. I don't know that ever came like on Toonami, and like I have friends who kind of went down that sort of anime manga gateway, but I never knew how that on ramp even went.
Yeah, I think the thing that actually that opened me up to anime really was, well, first it was Akira. Like my dad showed me Akira at a very early age, and I saw that, and that just like, you know, fascinated me so much. I just, you know, I love that. And then it was some other anime that I had seen too. But I think in terms of manga at this time, we're going way back. I think they had just dropped like the Shonen Jump magazines. When they dropped the Shonen Jump magazines, there was like your Naruto, there was One Piece, there was Hikaru no Go, there was Shaman King, Sandland, and I think a few others. And for me, the manga of choice that I gravitated towards was Shaman King. And I just thought that was just the coolest thing, because to me, seeing Yo Asakura as a kid, I know he's not Black, but he just struck me as a Black character because he had like headphones and he had like the whole funk thing vibe he was going on with his music, and you know, his whole vibe just struck me as that. But that clearly is a Japanese character, but the energy of it just really appealed to me the most. And then, you know, obviously there was like Naruto, and the other manga that appealed to me was Hikaru no Go. That was I want to say Yumi Hana and Takashi Obata. Takashi Obata is the artist for Death Note, you know. Okay. And I remember seeing his work, and I just remember like there was no action really. Like there wasn't like a battle manga or anything, but there was a scene in there where there are some students talking, and one of the characters, whose name is also Akira, he had to play the game without looking at the board. but the way it was drawn was so captivating to me.
Mm.
And I was just like, this is the most interesting thing in the world, like as a kid.
Right.
So there was that. And then I think around that time, I had also seen Animatrix, because like the Matrix was like blowing up. But I got a glimpse of the Animatrix from my dad, and like that, Ghost in the Shell, that type of stuff I had seen. And I just remember that really, really like gripped my attention. And then I think a few years later, this movie called Tekken Kinkreet came out. And I think at the same time, Final Fantasy VII Advent Children came out. So there was a lot of cool stuff coming out and like that, like mid to early 2000s.
Yeah.
And it was just like all this cool stuff just inspired me so much. And I was like, oh, one day I'm gonna do something,
Word.
And then I think there was the last thing, and I'll shut up, was I remember seeing Kill Bill came out around that time too. And I remember seeing it it actually came on TV. And I remember seeing there was an animated sequence by, I think, Kazuto Nakazawa that shows up like in the middle of Kill Bill. And that was the first time I had been exposed to Kazuto Nakazawa. And I was just like, the way this person draws eyes is the coolest thing in the world. And when I saw it was the Orin Ishii scene, and she, the fire, like just that look, like arrested me completely. I was just like, I think this is so fucking cool. Sorry, didn't mean to swear, but
you're good, man. You're good.
But I just thought it was so cool. And then, I think a little bit later, Samurai Champloo came out, and that was that. But yeah, and obviously Cowboy Bebop. I don't need to go into all that, but that's a whole nother part of the story for later.
Word.
But those are the things that made me like want to do this.
Yeah. Gotcha. So I'm gonna ask this then, because just all these deep cuts you're naming, just I see the time frame, right? So now I gotta ask, were you like the full out silk shirt Naruto running down the hallway dude? Was that you?
You see, here's the kicker. I'm so old. Everyone thinks that it's like, oh, the Naruto run. That's incorrect. It was not the Naruto run. It was actually closer to the Dragon Ball run, like Goku or like Gohan run, or it was Sonic. See, people always get it wrong. They're like, oh, the Naruto run. No. The Naruto run came after.
I feel like you're deflecting though. Like, was that you running down the hall?
Yes, of course. Of course. But you know what? You know what else? There's another manga that I mentioned. There's another that I forgot to mention. I Shield 21. That was another one that I had read. And there's this character, Senna, who like plays football and he's like super fast or whatever. And I remembered like that was the first time I was exposed to Yusuke Murata. And that character, there's a sequence, I think it's like the first volume, the first chapter, but there's a part where a bully is like asking him, like, hey, go get me this thing from some other part of the school or whatever. Like, go get me this lunch or something. And he's just like, okay. And he like runs from one end of the school to the other. And he comes and he's like, oh, they didn't have it. And the guy's like, what? There's no way that you went and checked. And he's like, but it was so funny the way it was drawn. But that appealed to me because I was like, yeah, that's me. I would definitely run the hallways. I was definitely that person. But it was people don't understand. That shit was fun. Like I would run, I would jump over like trash cans. I would like run up the side of the lockers and shit. Because it was like a game. It was like, oh, maybe I can make it. In the time before the bell rings. I can like duck and weave through all these people. And like all the coaches would just look at me and be like, that kid needs to be on like track or like football or something. Like why is he so fast?
Yeah, no, my best friend in life, he was the best man in my wedding. He's out in Oakland now, still pursuing visual arts. But he went down that same path, right? He had the Shonen Jump magazines. Like I went to his house. he didn't have cable, but he had all the Shonen Jump. He like had all the manga, and that was him running everywhere. He ended up joining the track team, you know, but he stuck with it. So I don't. It's there's something about it, like that path, like you said, that early 2000s sort of Eastern invasion, like just really captivated me. You know,
why are all these kids so weird? Yeah. Yeah.
but nah, man. So okay, and so you said so seeing all that made you determine, okay, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm going to do something. When does a career in visual arts like really start to make sense to you as being worth pursuing?
It honestly didn't start to make sense until like the latter years of like high school, even. And even then, it was still kind of fuzzy because I think all the things that we have available to us now as artists didn't really exist, you know? So there was no way for anyone to know, except for like maybe DeviantArt, but
Yeah.
you know.
Right.
So there was no real way for anybody to like get your stuff out there. There's like, you know, DeviantArt, there was like Facebook, and then, you know, people kind of, I stayed like, I tried to like really avoid social media for the longest time, and then eventually I caved because it was like, I need to do that. That was right around college. But I think once I got to college and I started, you know, taking like classes, you know, with for sequential art stuff, it started to kind of like seem possible, but at the same time it was still a hurdle because it was like there was this kind of like weird aversion to manga. It's like it still was not as accepted. And like the shit I was trying to do, sorry.
You're good.
The stuff I was trying to do
Yeah.
was tricky because it was like I wanted to, at that time, I was really into like Final Fantasy and stuff like that. And that was, I was trying to like draw, like I had my own characters, but then I wanted to try to do something with like Black characters, but I was trying to find this way of combining like African things and like Black, like Afrocentric things into my work and put it into like this like fantasy kind of thing. But there wasn't really a word for it like that. And people kept thinking like, oh, is this like Boondocks? But it wasn't like Boondocks. It was like, oh, this reminds me of Boondocks. And it was just like, it was so annoying. And it was like, is that the only, at the time that was the only frame of reference that people could really, you know, and I'm like, no, you know, so there was like a period of that. And it was just like trying to like get into comics because eventually people try to like knock your dream of like doing like manga and stuff like that and anime. And it's just like, oh, well, you know, the only person that's able to do it was Felipe Smith at the time. Like that was like a big guy that was coming up and everybody knew who he was. But it's like, that's just like one, like a million chance. And like, you'll never reach that. You'll never achieve that. That's like impossible. Like, I got told this stuff to my face, but strangely, not necessarily from professors. It was mostly other students that would try to like tell me what could and couldn't be done. And naturally, I rebelled against that. And, you know, some people might have thought I was kind of a jerk for it, but I didn't care. I was just, you know, I kind of had that Naruto like personality where it was just like, I'm going to do this thing and you're not going to stop me. And I'm going to find a way to do it and nothing's going to get in my way. That kind of resilience was infectious for some, but also like frowned down upon. You know, it was like, who does this kid think he is? You know, and that was just the drive. I think it was like, I just really wanted to tell my stories. I didn't really know how to do it. And then it was kind of like, well, you got to get into the big two. And then it was like the tryouts for, you know, Marvel and DC. But at the time I was just like, I was really gunning for Marvel. But, you know, it was just, I felt myself I felt myself watering my work down to try to not say that my work's so much better than more, but it was just like I wasn't. I was conforming. You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And it just didn't feel right. And then
Mm-hmm.
eventually one day I just kind of was like, screw this. I'm just gonna do my own thing. And then that led me to where I am now. But it was not a linear path by any means.
Mm-hmm.
There were ups and downs. There was like, other projects I was gonna do and stuff that was gonna take off and it didn't take off. And people want to draw stuff for them, but not pay as much. And
Right.
it was a lot. It was a lot. So ultimately, now I'm kind of in a position where I'm starting to get to a position where I can finally do the things I want to do.
Mm-hmm.
And that that's taken years. It's taken years to do that. I didn't have the like finances to really do the things I wanted to do. So you
Yeah.
kind of take on other projects. My name wasn't really like big like that. So you have to do the work to try to get better and refine it. And if people kind of look at you like, okay, pretty good, or oh, you need to work on this. I
Mm-hmm.
will say this, in that phase of me like trying to do stuff in the American comic market, I met a lot of really cool friends. I met a lot of really talented artists, and they gave me some pointers, you know. And then eventually you can only take pointers for so long before you decide to just be like, okay, how do I draw it?
Yeah.
And then there's a point before that where you're trying to draw like, your idols. You're trying to draw like your heroes,
Mm-hmm.
I remember I really, really, really wanted to draw as well as Takeshi Obata. To me, that was like the greatest thing in the world. Like I was like, oh, I gotta draw like the artist that drew Death Note because what I draw is better than him, you know. But then it was like, okay, this is cool, but at the same time, don't you want to be known for like what you can do? You
Mm-hmm.
know, no one's gonna respect you if you're just a watered down version of another artist.
Yeah.
No one's gonna just gonna be like, oh, you're just a knockoff, blah blah blah. You
Mm-hmm.
know, I liked Olivia Coipel, but at the end of the day, it's like you're not Olivia Coipel. Only Coipel is Coipel. Like
Right.
you could go down the rabbit hole of like Travis Charest and Dai Kruan and all those guys, but that's not the point. The point is you are yourself, and you have to be yourself. You have to bring something to the table that only you can.
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay. So, well, since we're here, what describe to me what you feel like you bring that only you bring?
I think there's a certain. It's funny because an editor at Jump, editor Yoshida, that said it, and it
Mm-hmm.
just I've stuck to it. Where it was
Mm-hmm.
like he described my work as a successful fusion of Eastern and Western influence, and that was something that I had heard more than once, and I was like, okay, let's lean into that.
Yeah.
I think what I bring to the table, it's so weird because I don't like bigging myself up like that, but there are
Right.
things that I can look at and objectively know, like, okay, there's a certain flair that I bring to my character designs. There's a certain
Mm-hmm.
when I'm allowed to just do what I want to do, there's a certain like energy that comes with the character designs. The clothing is always like a big, component. The
Mm-hmm.
haircuts are always a big component. Like there's something about that I try to bring when it comes to doing like my panel work. Usually my goal is to make it feel as cinematic as possible and make it
Mm-hmm.
feel like stills from a movie or an animated like show. I never want my work to just feel like it's just a comic book.
Mm-hmm.
If someone tells me, "Oh, these look like storyboards," that's a compliment to me. That makes
Yeah.
me, no matter how it's intended, when
Mm-hmm.
someone says that, that always lets me know, good, this is the step I want to go in. Like I'm glad that they feel that way. Um, I think over the years, my style has changed so much. You know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean? And that's usually because in my 20s, I
Mm-hmm.
was trying to figure out my style.
Mm-hmm.
I was trying to figure out, you know, how I was going to make this thing and what I wanted to do. And at the time, I felt like, with Instagram popping off of Facebook and all that type of stuff, I was doing things that people hadn't really quite seen before, at least like in the way that I was doing it. So naturally, you have people that are going to want to do this thing that you're doing.
Yeah.
And I remember just being so angry about that because I didn't know how to take it. I didn't know how to respond to it properly because it was just like I worked really hard to create this thing, and someone comes up and it's just like, I like this style. I'm going to draw like you. And it would drive me insane, like all the time. And I would like look at it and I just like, yo, stop doing that. But at the same time, the irony is that I didn't see that it's like, hey, you were also influenced by other artists and you were trying to draw like those other artists.
Right.
That's, you should take it as a compliment that people are looking at what you're doing and seeing there's something in what you do that awakens something inside of them and they want to try to bring it out. It took me years to come to that conclusion. It took me years. Like it was not immediate. Like, oh wow, I should be flattered. Like it was like, Now it's to the point where it's so painfully obvious that I can almost, if I'm on social media or anything like that, I can like look at the explore page and see who's pulled from my work and who's like been influenced by it. And sometimes I'll just go just to see and be like, follow back. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
I'm like, another one,
Right.
Some of it is like, okay, I can see they're trying to do their thing. And some of them I'm like, oh, they're just blatantly just drawing my drawings and maybe switching a few design elements here and there. But like, I know that face. I know exactly where that face came from. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But that is something that comes with the territory. So yeah, that's just kind of like how it's been over the years. Like, yeah. Okay. Did I answer your question? I just started going on this rant.
Yeah. Nah, you answered it. We were talking about what you brought that other people don't bring.
There you go.
Yeah. So I mean, you brought all these dope Eastern and Western influences together, and then you also brought up a whole generation of artists.
And that's not to say, and I need to be very clear about this. I'm not the first to do it, nor am I the best to do it. There are people I think that are my predecessors that have done it like way better that I was influenced by. You have, Chase Conley, obviously. You've got, it's funny because LaShawn Thomas isn't someone I would say this influenced me artistically, but his drive influenced me. There was something, there was an old YouTube video he said, and I clung to it like it was scripture, where he was like, every time you sleep, somebody is trying to take your spot. And it's like, I just held that as a kid, and I was like, I'm never gonna go to sleep. And then obviously I think Ronald Wimberly is another one. Like all these guys are much older than me, but well, Chase is a little bit, he's like a big brother, but I remember seeing their work and they were somebody that was like, oh, that's really cool. That's how you do it. That's how you add like come up with some kind of style to it. But I think the difference between those artists and myself was like I had this kind of like Final Fantasy element. Like I loved Square Enix or Squaresoft at the time, and I just loved adding those kinds of elements to my work. But I would say those guys have a huge influence on how I draw and like the decisions I've made as an artist over the years, for sure. Especially Chase. Especially Chase. Yeah.
Got it. Okay. So all right. So making a career of things, right? Like we know you now because you've been drawing static for the last 2 years, but how do you make ends meet, right? Like not to get into your
Sorry.
not to get into your pockets, right? But
Sorry. That was so funny. I know it wasn't meant to be, but
yeah, not because I mean, listen, life as an artist anywhere is difficult. Life as an artist in Brooklyn has got to be astronomically difficult.
I'm doing the impossible right now.
Yeah.
Oh.
So, yeah, I guess for like the aspiring out there, like
Yeah.
how do you piece things together? I imagine it's a little bit of work from a little bit of everywhere.
I'm like, how do I answer this without being disparaging,
Right.
without shaking the screen?
Yeah.
Um, honestly, and I'm not even joking when I say this, it is
Mhm.
the grace of God because it is tough. This is not easy by any stretch. I have been blessed enough to have an apartment and
Mhm.
have some form of income, and I've been, people commission me to do things where I'm able to
Mhm.
pay for all of this. But, you know, it's kind of like, what is it? What's that? Oh, what's that scripture where it's like a little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the heads, a hand's
Mhm.
rest, and poverty will creep upon you like a thief in the night, and scarcely like an armed man.
Yeah.
That is so real because like
Hmm.
that's exactly how it is. It's like if I am idle, if I just sit around and kick my feet up for too long,
Yeah.
yeah,
It's all gonna crash.
yeah, exactly. So I'm like, oh man, I gotta work. I have
Mhm.
to work. And some people don't get that. They're like, why don't you take a break? And it's like, no, no, no. I can't take a break right now. Like I
Right.
have to keep working. I have to draw. I gotta find a way to survive. And
Mhm.
that trickles down to why I've had to take on projects that are not my own,
Mhm.
because I need to be able to afford to not be on the street.
Yeah.
And the thing is, getting a place in New York is so difficult.
Yeah.
It's so difficult. Rent is high. Rent is high. Like and I'm like, people, why don't you just move? It costs money to move. Like,
Right. Yeah.
I wish it was that simple. Like, oh yeah, I'll just move. I'll just take what money I've got left and I'll just get a truck and I'll just go to a different state and I'll just do that, or a different country. Yeah. It's so easy. It's
Yeah.
very easy. It's not. Why didn't I think of that before?
Yeah.
But it's, at the same time, it's a blessing to be able to work in this environment.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful to be able to work and be able to, be able to pay my bills. It's not easy. It is not easy. I would, if you can get a roommate, by all means, if you can
Mhm.
do that, by all means, or, don't live in Brooklyn, don't
Yeah.
do that. That's also a
That's
possibility,
that's also great advice.
but at the same time, I chose this path. And I
Yeah.
think the reason I chose it was because I knew it was going to keep me diligent. I knew it was going to keep me,
Mhm.
I knew it was going to, it was like that no pressure, no diamonds type of thing.
Yeah.
This is going to be extremely difficult, but if you can do it,
Mhm.
you can be so much stronger on the other end. You know what I mean?
For sure.
So that's how I do it.
Got you. Okay. All right. So we've talked about how thin this tightrope is, right? Now we can get into some of your resume, as it were, right? So I was telling you before, I've been reading Exogenesis, um, which if you guys don't know, it's a manga that Nick Draper-Ivey drew. It's a story idea from Johnny O'Brien, who apparently was an NBA star. Was written by Ted McIntosh. Um, how did that project end up on your desk?
Um, I'm trying to think. I have to go way back. I think Noir at the time was like a fairly new indie like manga company, and I can't remember who tossed it at me. I don't know if it was my friend Mikkel, or it was somebody was like, hey, you want to do this project, and I was just like, okay, let's see. And at the time, the money sounded like promising. I was like,
Mm,
well, this is more money than I've ever had in my entire life. So I guess I'll give it a shot. You know, that's right. I did it for the money. Anyway, no. Honestly, it was just kind of like, okay, let's see where this goes. But at the time, you know, I saw what Johnny was trying to do,
mm,
and I believed in that vision. And I at the time there was Mikkel, there was like this other artist named I think Win. But there was a lot of like strong artists there, and everybody was like really trying to do something and
mm.
that vision. And that was kind of how I did it. I think, Trey and I are very, very different people. But that ended up kind of working a little bit to the book's benefit, I want to say, because it was like there were things in there that he would write, and I'd be like, that's not bad. And there were
Mm.
things in there he'd write, and I'd be like, we're not doing that. And then I would like change it.
Mm.
I remember Johnny specifically, he kind of didn't understand me to the point of like the kind of stories I like to tell. Like based off of my life in general, I just can't get into something if the hero does not struggle or
Mm.
suffer. Like it's like the hero has to suffer. Like
Yeah.
I'm always like one of those where I'm like, no, I got to see that hero just go through it, because there's something about seeing that hero just like upset, make it even better. It has to feel like a sermon. Does that make sense? It has to feel like all hope is lost, and I don't know how this character is going to get out of this.
Hmm.
But when they do, it's cathartic. It's like, oh,
Right.
okay, But even if they make it out by like the skin of their teeth, it's
Hmm.
like, okay, I believe that. I buy that. I
Hmm.
don't like things just handed to characters. I don't like things being easy, because my life is not easy. Life is not easy.
It's a fact.
So
Well,
that's how that came to my desk. Yeah.
got you. We'll come back to that concept. Because we revisit it a lot in your work. Um,
Why is there so much sadness?
so,
Who hurt this?
oh God, I promise this is a professional interview, guys. So the I guess the next thing that you did that maybe you're known for, something I didn't even recognize, right? Uh, Black Panther, the album. The cover to that album is nice, minimal, unassuming, right? We're just gonna look at T'Challa's like necklace kind of built into the costume.
Mhm.
And for ages, I just assumed that was a picture of the costume from the film. No, it's not at all. It's a painting. And this guy painted it. How does that happen?
Okay, so I think at the time, I it's so funny because here we are, me trying to do things for Marvel and then not
Mhm.
doing things for Marvel, and then you end up doing this really, really, really big thing for Marvel.
Right.
Well, someone, I think it was one of the an agent had reached out to me. It was actually someone from Interscope.
Hmm.
Anyway, someone from Interscope. I have I have choice words, but I
Uh,
won't say them. They can't come out of my mouth here. But it was someone from Interscope that messaged me, and they had said, "Oh, I got your information from Disney." Which, think about that. I don't know what Disney is watching me to
right.
know. Like that's somehow reading that message was the scariest thing in the world, because I was like,
It's Skynet, bro.
I'm like, but I don't remember interacting with anyone from Disney. So how does, but it's
Yeah.
like they're always watching.
Yeah.
And it was like, yeah, I got your information from Disney. And at the time, I think Kendrick had just dropped he dropped a music video. And in the music video, there was like a clip. I don't know if it was I think it was Loyalty. It was another song. It might have been. I can't remember. But in the music video, there's a part where all these people line up and there's like a the movie the thing they do with the film. I can't remember what it's called, but they cut to it and it has like BP album coming soon or something like that. It's a blink and you miss it moment.
Yeah.
And then, I was like, oh man, that's really cool. And at the time there was like the trailer and all this stuff. So it was like, I was like getting in shape and I was doing all this. And I got that message and they were like, yeah, we want you to do some art for this album for like, Kendrick. And I was just like, what? and I remember I brushed it off at first. I was just like, no, this is fake. It's got to be fake. There's no way, And I remember talking to my roommate at the time, and I was just like, it's probably nothing. Let me just see. And he was like, okay, well, I got to send you like paperwork and NDA and all this other stuff. And I look on it, and it said, I wish I could find the actual document, but it was the coolest thing, and I wish I had posted it, but it was like Nikolas Draper-Ivey X Kendrick Lamar. It was something like that. Yeah. It was like the coolest thing I had read. I was like, my name's next to his name. Holy shit. Right. Yeah, but it was for the Black Panther album. I remember thinking, oh man, I was so naive at the time. I was just like, just the idea of being part of it, and I wanted to do it, but I gave them like all these cool ideas. I did all these like cool drawings and whatever. And they're like, yeah, no, Kendrick just wants the necklace and the black. And I was like, I could draw so much cooler. Like, why would you get me to just do that?
Right.
But I was like, okay. And there was a moment where I was doing it, like I colored it with ink and Copic marker and some paint, and I scanned it in, and I was like adjusting everything on Photoshop. And there was a kind of like a moment, like a aha moment, like when I finished it, and I was just like, oh, that's it. You know what I mean? It was just a weird like wave that kind of washed over me. I was like, oh wow. So then I submitted it and signed the contract, and I was like super giddy about it. And I wish I had consulted a lawyer about all of this. Otherwise, I probably would not be struggling for rent. But hey, at the time, I was just like, I gotta do this thing. And, and then the album comes out and I get the packet and my name is not credited in the album. And it destroyed me. I was like, you didn't credit me for this? Like, they didn't credit me for my work? And I was so mad. But eventually I got over it. But it was just kind of like, But then it was so strange because I remember, I don't think they knew who they got. Because when word got out that I did it, people were trying to interview me about it. And the guy from Milestone was like, are you doing press about this? And I was just like, yes, because they told I'm allowed to do that. It's right. Like, I think they were probably worried that I was going to talk about money or whatever. And I was like, I didn't care about that. I just wanted to be on a project like this and contribute in some way. And it was like really cool to like work with, Kendrick. That was my main thing. I was like, cool. Some Kendrick. That was my, my mindset. But looking back on it now, regardless of how things turned out, it's still, a piece of art that I'll always see it somewhere and be like, oh wow, I drew that, Sometimes I forget that I drew it, and people will remind me and be like, can you do this? And I was like, oh yeah, that's right, I did do that. Not about that. I really do forget about it sometimes. I'm just like, oh yeah.
So this is a rare instance of my current and past hobbies kind of meeting each other, right? You're the second person that I've known personally who's done an album cover, like a major album cover. The first is an artist named I don't know if she goes by her name. P.S. I'm dope is her art tag on Twitter. But she did two. She did the Ninth Wonder, the Wonder Years album cover, and then right after she did Wale's Ambition. And when I met her, she was finalizing the Ambition album cover. And long story short, she sent a rough draft to, I think it was also Interscope that Maybach Music was through at the time. And yeah, she sent a rough draft. And the next thing she knows is on the side of a bus. And she's like, wait, it's not done yet. And Wale's ear is like purple on the cover. And that just ended up being the final thing. Was there something like that on the Black Panther album that you're like, I wish I had gotten to tweak this a little bit?
I wish I had tweaked that contract a little bit. That's what I wish.
Yeah.
I think because at the time they had said, oh, well, we're gonna. I thought the contract was them just having permission to like show it to Kendrick or something like that. But it was like, oh no, we're gonna go ahead with this and we're gonna pay you, for this or whatever. Just like, okay. But looking back on it now, I'm like, oh, those bastards.
Yeah. I mean, that's a tough situation to be in, right?
Music
like
industry is like that though.
Absolutely.
So be very careful. It'd be very careful.
And most people don't know what to ask for or that they can ask for things.
They scare you. They definitely scare you with like, well, we'll go to somebody else, and you're just like, oh, but I need money. I'm poor.
Yeah. Nah, the music industry, it's like that. It's like that. But yeah. Anyway, so we move on from Kendrick, and we'll skip a few scenes here and get to Milestone, because like you said, you'd had a relationship with Reggie Hudlin, and it sounds like perhaps unbeknownst to Dennis, and he just happened to find you at the same or around the same time on Instagram.
And he like messaged me. No, Dennis had commented on something, and it was just like, I think it was like Dennis Cowan art or something like that. And like the typical like, hey, check your inbox, And I was like, oh God, like one of these. And for some reason I saw his name and I was just like, no. Like I was like, that can't be. And I go and look and I'm like, wait, is this like the Dennis Cowan? And it's like he was trying to message me for a while. And I was like, okay, they want me to do, something for at the time, because I got an email. Yeah, I got an email. It was about the Milestone Returns.
Yeah.
And I remember looking at it and I was just like, my first initial thought was, it didn't say, hey, do you want to do static? That wasn't what was said. It was like Milestone Returns, blah, 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 blah. DC fandom, something. And I was just like, I don't feel like doing any more free work. And I just dismissed it.
Yeah.
And then it turned out that Dennis had been trying to get in contact with me because he wanted me to do, static. They didn't say it was static.
Yeah.
So when he asked me to do it, I was like, okay. But I remember doing the pages with him, but when they told me that they wanted me to do like static, I remember being like, you sure you don't want to get like Quapel or like Kari Randolph or like I remember I was just listing all the people that were so much better than me. I was like, are you sure you don't want to get someone else to do this? And they're like, nope, it's the unanimous decision. We want you to do it. And I'm like, and I remember like thinking, okay, well, if word gets out that I was asked to do static and I turned it down, I'll probably never hear the end of that. But also it's like, you could do this. You could do it for the culture and, to see if we can give them something cool. And that's what I was excited to do it. And then they were like, yeah, and we're going to have Crisscross do your layouts. And I was like, what? what are like, no, I don't need that. And they're just like, yeah, we're gonna have someone else do your layouts for you. And then you're gonna have to draw on top of those layouts and just finish it. And there's just like, that's but that's not really how I draw.
Right. Right. All right.
So that's kind of what happened. And that was whew, that was an experience.
Mm-hmm.
Experience. I'll say that. And I'm very grateful for that experience. But that's kind of what happened. That's how I got on Static. Yeah.
So you're for one, you're from Detroit,
Yes.
right?
I was born in Lansing, Michigan, and then raised in Detroit. Both of my parents are from Detroit. So I just say Detroit because I don't know anything about Lansing. Their parents just happened to be in Lansing, and we were right to Detroit. So
Gotcha.
Yeah. So I just say that I'm Detroit. Yeah.
Gotcha. There's a lot of comic artists from Detroit. But obviously Dwayne McDuffie is also from Detroit, right? Yeah. What, like, because my exposure to Static was strictly the animated series up until maybe 6 months before you and I connected for the first time. Like when I kind of discovered that Static was a comic, I'm like, oh, there's this whole universe, right? It's like, okay, but all I knew about it was the animated show. What was your exposure and what did it mean to you at the time?
Oh man. For me, it was, I definitely grew up on the Static Shock cartoon, but my dad had given me some Milestone comics from back in the day. For me, Blood Syndicate, and I don't think there was any like original Statics in there. It was just like, it was Blood Syndicate. But he had, I think, the Static comics.
Gotcha.
And from there, I was just kind of like, oh, these things are connected. But I had to learn, like everybody had to learn, it's not Static Shock. It's just
static. Right.
Static, and like I had to learn so much stuff from Milestone, that just things that people just don't think about, but it's just like, oh no, Dennis was very, very much on my ass about Static is this height. He's why are you drawing him so tall? He's not tall. He's like 5'8". I'm like, okay, what are you doing? What's this? How Dennis talk. Like, okay, yeah, that's him. That's Virgil. It's like, okay, got it. Mr. Cowan, can I do this? Sure. Like, Mr. Cowan is Static allowed to do this, that, and the third? Yeah, he can do that. Like, okay, great. So every single decision that I made on Static, I went to Dennis first. And the only reason I went to Dennis first is because I obviously couldn't go to Dwayne, but it was like, I was really, before this whole thing popped off, I remember being scared out of my mind because fans were fans, and that's just because they love that character, they're passionate about the character. And sometimes that frustration and, those hostile comments come out. It's all just because they're passionate about the character. They don't want to see anybody fuck it up, sorry. But that was really scary. And I was like trying to ask everybody that I could that would listen, like how to do this right. I asked Cross how to get it right. I asked Dennis, obviously, to Reggie about it, talked to Joe Illidge about it. I even went so far as to talk to Michael about it. And that was a very scary, scary thing. Like I messaged him. I think we talked on, I want to say it was like Facebook Messenger or something, but we talked.
Probably.
And it was like, it was the equivalent of an Avatar where Aang goes to visit the spirit with like all the different faces, and like, you can't make a face, otherwise he'll like kill you. Like that's how scared I was. Talking to Michael, I was just like, yep. He was like, yep. So if you mess this up, coming from him, I'm just like, oh God.
And what's hilarious is he probably was not serious in most of those moments because that man just jokes constantly.
Listen to me.
Mhm.
I was just like, this is the scariest conversation in the world. And
Right.
then once I was able to get off the phone, I was just like, I cannot fuck this up. I cannot fuck this up.
But I think, the other thing you had working against you, right? Milestone had been teasing a return for like 5 years by the
Mhm.
time, this came out. And yeah, people were certainly very vocal about it. And everybody wants to know who to blame.
Oh
There's no
God.
information coming out, like, and
Yeah.
so you get the brunt of it. Whoever's visible gets the brunt
Me.
of
I got the brunt of it.
it.
I got, yo, oh my God. There's so many things. There's so many things
Hmm.
have nothing to do with that everybody is like, you're the reason that blah blah blah. And I'm like, no, 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 I didn't do that.
Mm.
Like when they changed the origin, which made sense
Yeah.
what they were trying to do. But God, do you have any you can't fathom
Mm.
the amount of messages, the amount of comments, the amount of like subtweets and disses. Like I got so much shit because of that. And
Mm.
it was just like, and it's so easy to be like, well, just turn it off. Just turn off then you go to your comments, you do a drawing. Oh, I hate this, blah, 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 blah. And you're just like, I just want to make something that we're all gonna enjoy.
Yeah.
You know? And it was tough. It was really tough because at the time, I'm working over, Crisscross, like his work, and our styles are very, very, very different. So
Hmm.
I'm like already trying to like bring out his work, and fuse it with my work and try to do that well, while also trying to appeal to like make sure that what Vita has written makes sense and it
Yeah.
looks really, and then also trying to appeal to like a fan base that goes really hard for this character
Right.
and not seeing, and I'm going to say this incorrectly because that's the joke.
Mm.
They're not seeing the Static Shock that they remember.
Right.
That's not Static Shock, and it's static.
Just static.
Yeah, and I got that so much. I got it
Mm.
spades, and I was just like,
Yeah.
this is
Yeah.
in this book. That's like all I want.
Yeah. I think you got it bad also though, because we're just kind of in that age of toxic fandom,
Mhm.
right? So there's plenty of people that did not read Static, nor did they watch Static Shock, but they're just like, oh, look at you trying to wokeify my comics.
The thing that's No, I'm gonna go ahead and say it. The
Yeah.
thing that's so wild of it is if you go back and look at the old Milestone comics, they have been doing this for years. In fact, it was more extreme in
Yeah.
those books. Like it was dark. Like there
Yeah.
was some stuff there. I'm like, they released this? This dark shit.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. No,
but the
like,
thing is, when I read those old comics, I fell in love with that Milestone. Like, I went back and like started looking at the older stuff. And I
mm,
was like, man, we need this kind of energy back,
yeah.
So like
Yeah.
that was like my goal when I got to season 2. I was like, oh, I want to really try to bring that feeling into that. But
Yeah. I remember doing a video. I did a video because when season one came out, everybody's like, "Oh, it's because Origins can't be a BLM rally," and so I ended up doing a video like comparing the two origin stories, and I'm like, "There's parallels all through here. Like, is it really that different?" It's
what's crazy? The thing is if Milestone did not address what was going on in the world today, you know what everyone would say? Why are they doing all this gang stuff? Why aren't they talking about the issues that matter? People, our people are being gunned. Like that would
yeah,
have been the conversation. The
right,
conversation would have been, why aren't they talking about this?
hmm,
That's what would have happened.
right,
You
and then
know.
it would have been DC sanitized Milestone. That would have been the headline.
So, you know, I think there's probably some ways you could have. I think everybody could have got a little bit of both,
Mm-hmm.
but you know, they did what they did, and they stuck to their guns, and that's the origin.
Yeah.
Didn't make the origin, but there was like, okay, I see the vision. I think even so, the way I think in my initial, which is probably why I got hired, is because I did that initial concept of static, like my take on static,
Mm-hmm.
and I said it would touch on today's events.
Mm-hmm.
I think Dennis probably saw that and was like, "This is the guy." You
Got you.
know,
Yeah.
that's probably what happened. I can only assume. You
Yeah.
know,
No, they were very vocal, at least in their interviews. Like, look, we're not just playing greatest hits. Like, this is not a continuation at all. This is a reboot. It's going to
yeah,
feel familiar, but it's going to be something new. And we'll make sure you can go back and read the old stuff if that's what you want.
because it's there. You can go and look at it if you want to go watch. Static Shock at HBO Max. It's right there. You can go watch all the episodes and relive that, and just be right there. If you want to look at, the old comics, you want to look at the old Static, you can look at that. You want to read Rebirth of the Cool, you can read Rebirth of the Cool. It's right. All those things are still there.
Yeah.
This is a new thing. But anyway, I don't really have too much like resentment when I
Mm-hmm.
look back on it. I'm like, okay, I did it.
Mm-hmm.
And I did learn a few things from Chris and from Vita. And
Mm-hmm.
that was, it's very different team that I'm used to like working with.
Mm-hmm.
But, we pulled it off somehow. And someone might say, "Oh no, you guys didn't pull it off, and we hate it. We hate you."
Jeez.
And that's fair. That's
Mm-hmm.
fair. I get that. But I wish that people knew when going into these products. Everyone's always like, "Well, if I was doing static, and if you don't have control over that." That's the
Right.
thing I need people to understand. You don't have as much control over it as you think you have. You
Mm-hmm.
are they tell you what they're gonna do, they tell you what the vision is, where they're going with it, and there's a set criteria. There are things that they want in the book, there are things they want to address, things they want to talk about, characters they want inside of the book,
Mm-hmm.
characters they want also with the other characters. Like these are all things you have to consider, and you have to still create a narrative that encompasses all of that while also trying to like, be a writer or be an artist or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just your thing.
Yeah.
First of all, it's not even your character.
Right.
So there's that. You have to
Mm-hmm.
understand that it's not your character. You can't just do everything that you want to do. You have to go and talk to the people that made it. You've got to get the okay. You've got to get the approval. I really, really need people to understand that before they start talking out of the side of their neck about what they would have done and what should have been done, and blah,
Mm-hmm.
blah, blah. There is a whole like hierarchy of, people that you have to go through to make
Right.
sure that this comes to life.
Yeah.
Swear.
Yeah. No. Well, I told you we would address the haters, right? But
It's just I wish people knew that. It's like you
yeah.
can't just do whatever you want to do. Like there's
Yeah.
so many cool things I want to do, but you can't.
Right.
Sorry.
Nah, so I was talking to Priest just about the role of an editor, right? An editor is typically the first creative in the room, right? Like in the way a sound person like plays the band,
Mhm.
right? Like you could play the meanest guitar solo in the world, but I have the power to turn you up or down as the church sound guy, right? The editor's got to kind of keep you in bounds, so to speak. Um, and then I imagine with this, there's a lot of hype, right? It's a property that had been dormant for more than a decade, almost
Mhm.
two at the time when you guys brought it back. So I imagine there's a lot of hands, a lot of eyes um, on that. But my question to you, though, is really so because at the time, right, your art style is very much Eastern influenced, right? We go from Exogenesis, which is very much a manga written for manga fans, to Static, which is a comic written for comic fans, sold in comic shops, you know, how was it, and obviously you have the additional challenge of working over another artist's layouts, but just how difficult was it to make your style fit a very American format?
You know what was interesting? When I did the Milestone Returns pages, I still think those are some of the most fun pages.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because Dennis did the layouts on those. And
Mm.
somehow Dennis's style and my style kind of worked well together. Like that just felt more like, okay, this is gonna work.
Mm.
And then when it came to like doing the thing with Cross, our styles are just very, very different. We don't frame things the same. We don't shoot things the same. We don't have this, I guess, like camera in our head. So that was really tough because it was like it almost it altered my art style a lot. And I had to kind of put my foot down because it was like it almost like broke my art style. You know what I mean? And I was like I'm trying to like make these two things fit, and it doesn't work. And sometimes it would result in drawings that were not the best that they could be. Sometimes it worked well.
Yeah.
But a lot of times it would kind of be like, that's just that's not how I draw. It's not gonna look as appealing as it should. So we would try to like, compromise. And there's some stuff where I just follow Chris's things and just kind of, zero in. And that was the other thing too. I wasn't allowed to jump ahead. So like even if I had the script that Vita had written, even if I had the script, I had to wait until I got the layouts. And that, clock is ticking. So it's like, where are the and then once the layouts are there, I'm like, okay, now I got to go back. And then I would see the layouts. I'm like, okay, this needs to be adjusted. So I had to like adjust, then get that approved, and then be like, okay, now can I draw? Great. And then I have to like do that shit like as quickly as I could. And I'm like, okay, so, and then at the time it was like, doing colors as well.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, I gotta do all this stuff. But I still think there's some elements that I thought were pretty fun. Like the first issue, there was some stuff where it was kind of working. And then I think it was issue 3 where they split it. One of the issues they split it, and it was my work and Cross's work.
Yeah.
And that was almost like the test of like, all right, kid, let's see what you got. And it was like, okay, you got them for one more issue, and then they're like 5 and 6, you can do your thing. And I was like, finally.
No, I remember that page. I remember that issue when they split the pages, because it was the sequence where it's Virgil talking to his dad. I was going to say Dwayne.
I mean, he's modeled after Dwayne, but yeah.
He's modeled after Dwayne, right? But, there's this sequence, and I'm like, why didn't they let him draw this page?
Can I tell you something? When I read that sequence, when Vita sent me that sequence, I remember like shedding a tear and calling them and being like, you ain't shit for writing this, right? Like, this is like, it was so good. It was so good. I was like, how dare you? How dare you write this? Like, I was like emotional, and the thing is, when I read it in the script, I could see it. I could see how I would have the light hit them. I could see how I would, and they're like, yeah, we're going to give that scene because you got the first half of the book. And I was like, I was like, no. No. I was so bad about it. I was like, oh, okay, fine.
I felt that way reading it too.
Oh, well, I mean, now the thing is, Cross is, I'm not gonna, shit on him about, that Cross is a phenomenal artist in his own right. I think it was difficult because we were so different. And I remember there'd be times where Cross and I we would get into it where it'd be like, you're not going to circumvent me and just go around that. And it would be a lot like talking to my dad when my dad would get like upset, and it would just be paragraphs and paragraphs. And I'm just like, Cross, I got to draw this. I got to do it. The book's got to get done, you know.
Yeah.
Like, you know.
Yeah, again, not to, disparage the work of Cross, right? Like it's not that the work is bad, right? Cross drew all of Blood Syndicate. Well,
exactly. That's the books that my dad gave me.
Yeah. Yeah. Like most of original Blood Syndicate is Criss Cross. Most of new Blood Syndicate is Criss Cross. And they're dope. I think it benefits from just being, the one style on the page. Like you said, it's just y'all styles are so different. So you're turning the page, you're expecting one thing, you're getting another. You're not getting something bad. You're just, I don't know, go to KFC, you bite into your fried chicken and it's country fried steak. It's like, it's a good food. It's just not what I ordered necessarily.
Yeah. The thing is too, is like Cross, if you look at his work, it's like, especially like some of his like character design stuff, it's like his character design stuff is really, really solid. Like I've seen, I think it was a Black Lightning he did that I was like,
yeah,
there's no denying draw. The thing was that we were just so different, and like the layouts were just like compositionally, this is not how I would lay this page out, know.
Yeah.
And you're probably thinking like, well, isn't it just easy to just trace over it and just do that? But then when you have like a particular eye for how things work, you're like, wait a minute, no, that's not gonna work. We have to change that, and you have to like adjust. And I remember one time I asked him, because it was a way that he had drawn a character. I had noticed like something small. I was like, and then it hit me. I was like, he's tall. Like Cross is tall. And I sent him a text. I was like, Cross, are you tall by any chance? And he's just like, yeah. I'm like, however tall he was. And I was like, okay, that makes sense. Because that's why how he sees things.
Yeah.
Like, oh, okay. That's literally his eye level. That's how so I'm like, I have to adjust this to like the height of like what, Virgil's height. It was a weird thing. Yeah. That's how I was able to figure it out. I was like, okay, I got it now.
Got you. Okay. So if there was, and we'll have to talk about working with
saying any of this.
Say it again.
I hope he doesn't kill me for saying any of it.
Hey, listen, man. If he listens,
that tall black man just strangling me.
Criss Cross is not a small dude. I would not want to be strangled by Criss.
He's not. I'm pushing it. I'm pushing it on this interview.
but nah. So this is like, you're working for DC Comics, working for Milestone, bringing back Static, right? Yeah. There's obviously like, I guess mixed fan response. Like, I know
that first season, especially.
Yeah. I think my issue with season 1, it was slow. And I think it was that way across all the season 1 titles. It was like clearly written for the trade. And it was like, hey, and I appreciated Vita's approach. Like, well, we don't know how Virgil felt about getting those powers and these changes. And I'm like, I get that, but I just want to see him beat somebody up, right? Like,
what's funny? You know what's funny? I remember when we first got the script, and I remember saying like the first scene, like the first like 5 pages or the first like 3 pages need to open up with like the ending of the book already. Like it needs to open up with like some hot, like him in a hot street. Like we need to see him in the action of like, pull, you probably wonder how I end up in the situation, but don't actually see that. Yeah. But it's like, we need to see, it's going to go down. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But there was no time. So we just had to have the cold open. And I think that was because the way that it had been written in the Milestone Return thing, Vita was like, okay, well, we need to process that, And And that was why. But it did take a minute to get to the good part of what we came for.
Yeah.
A while. Yeah.
So with that, I'll skip ahead a bit to Shadows of Dakota. Right. So this time you're not just drawing. Well, for one, you're drawing free of anyone's layouts. So that's got to feel like a win, right?
Okay.
But you're also co-writing the story. Um, so yeah, you're co-writing the story.
All right, my cat is doing
Oh, nine.
stuff.
You're good. I figured. But so you're co-writing the story with Vita.
Yes.
The series is decidedly darker. We don't have to worry with origins. Like we get straight to the action, and you decide to bring back Ebon.
Mhm.
But before we even get into the story, like how was that experience kind of being
Sorry.
more so in the captain's chair?
And my cat is being a cat. So there's all these distractions right now.
That's all.
But you were asking, run that
Just
part.
how was it being like in the captain's chair, so to speak, for season two?
Well, okay. I remember finishing season one.
Mhm.
And before season one had even like started or finished, um I remember there was the Black Lives Matter thing. It was 2020.
Mhm.
There was 2020, and there was all of the stuff that was happening with Black Lives Matter. So there was George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, and there was one case in particular where there was this child um named Cowan Charles that was his body like was found.
Mhm.
And I remember seeing that report and hearing about that and hearing the tape of the person that was like supposedly like responsible for it and all of this stuff. And I remember them saying like comparing it to like Emmett Till. Like, it was something that was like just really gruesome, like how they found his body and all that type of stuff. And I remember the thing is there was so much going on and so many people dying at the time that like some stuff got swept under the rug. Like it was just you were hearing so much of it back to back.
Yeah.
And I remember just like that particular instant, I remember going and sitting in like the living room in the dark and just crying.
Mm.
And I remember like getting so angry that I wasn't having like the best thoughts. But I
Mm.
remember just going to a really, really dark place and thinking
Mm.
thoughts that I had never really thought before.
Mm.
And I just remember snapping out of it and being like, okay, but it's not everybody. Like you don't mean that,
Right.
it's like I was done.
Yeah.
And I had been carrying that. And then when I got on the static, you know, I was still carrying it. And
Mm.
I was just like, I had this idea for Ebon. And I
Mm.
was just like, I know what I want to talk about. And I'm like, if they let me do this, I needed somewhere to channel that emotion,
Mm.
channel that because it was someone that looked like he could have been one of my little brothers,
Yeah.
and it ate away at me. And I was just like, I need to put this somewhere. And
Mm.
then when I got hired by Milestone, I was like, what is Milestone for if not talking about this?
Right.
No. And I just remember like I had finished season one and I pitched it to Dennis originally because I was like, I pitched it as like The Wire, but with superpowers.
Mm.
And that was like the initial feel that I was like going for. I was really like trying to like go in there. And he's like, okay. And if you can believe it, the original story for Shadows of Dakota was even darker.
I believe
Like,
it.
it was even darker. And
Mm.
I remember pitching it, and Dennis was just like, these were his words. It was like, holy shit. He's like, well, yeah, we weren't gonna do that overseas, but now you kind of have to. And I was like, okay, if you bring me back, this is the story I want to tell. And I
Mm,
want, it to be centered around Ebon, you know.
mm,
And I told him what Ebon represented and why Ebon was so powerful.
mm.
Just like, okay, I see what you're doing. Because in the cartoon, we never really get context as to where does his shadow power come from? Where does that
Right.
come from? You
Yeah.
know, he's just kind of like, your villain of the week in the cartoon. And
Yeah.
I'm there's something here, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. This is a great time for me to just plug, right? Because I don't want to spoil Static Shadows of Dakota before the hardcover comes out on February 7th. If you have not already, go ahead and grab that. It's on Amazon. It's at your local shop. It's Black History Month. They have it everywhere. Just this month, though. But go grab that.
That's funny.
Because Ebon, he gets a level up, right? And it's not even so much a level up. It is, but it's also like just an explanation for the power set that makes so much sense when you compare it to Virgil. Like he's the true dark opposite of Virgil. And the way you play parallels all through that series, the 7 issues, like it's a great 7 issue story. And I'll leave it there at risk of spoiling it for people. But yeah, nah, man,
Emotional.
it's awesome.
Did it's kind of funny because people would tell me they're like, this is such a stark contrast from season like because
Yeah,
season one was kind of like okay, and then season two is like, well, we're in it. We're in it now. Like
yeah,
like page,
yeah,
I think it's like page 3 of issue 1. It just like starts off. It's like, oh, we're getting right to the action. We're getting right,
right.
you know. But Ebon, it's funny because I remember when coming up with his whole like vibe, I wanted his story to feel kind of like horror. And I
Mm,
remember like specifically referencing like Candyman
mm,
for that kind of vibe. Like I wanted it to feel like, you know, Virgil's story is one of like a superhero. It's one of, in his eyes, it's like, yeah, I'm gonna go and do the superhero things.
right.
But Ebon, it's horror. He's got all this stuff going on that I want
Mm,
to spoil, but it's like that's terrifying for him and for everyone else that interacts with him. It's like, oh, he's the embodiment of that, you know.
right.
And I didn't know like, how it was going to work, but we were trying to do it. And I remember I had very key moments that I had written and that I wanted to address. And Vita kind of came in and, helped me piece it together.
Mm,
And they were really encouraging the entire time because they were just kind of like, okay, this is it. This is the moment, and I would be like, all right, I'm gonna write. Some of it was really tough to draw and to write. And I think, one of the things that happens to one of the characters was very difficult every step of the way. It was
mm,
difficult to write it out. It was difficult, like thinking about the story, telling it. It was difficult even when it came to pitching it, like talking about what happened and talking about, Ebon's stance on it versus Virgil's stance on it. And like I would get emotional every single time. So when it came to writing it, that's when I knew I had something because
yeah,
it was like if you start getting choked up about it, it's like, oh no, that's good. That's good. If you feel it, your other readers will feel it too.
yeah.
And I remember having to do that issue, writing that issue, drawing that issue, like putting the words in for that issue. And I remember like having to like just step away from my computer because I was like, I need to go outside. Like I was so depressed, like having to do that,
And
you
you
know,
still decided to do it to us.
because it needed to be, it's like
Nah, it 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 needed to be done, right? It serves the story so well, right? Especially when you like you said, when you look at Virgil's reaction to it versus Ebon's like, it's like, nah, this makes all the sense in the world. And then even having Virgil, because that's the crux of who Static is as a character, right? He's a kid who found himself with powers and who has to constantly decide to use them for good. It's not like Spider-Man where he's like, oh, I had this one tragic thing happen and now I'm just good forever. No, like Virgil is constantly like, I could go left. I'll go right though.
The thing
Right.
that's so funny is people also forget that and this was something that people were talking about even in season one, but like people forget that Virgil Hawkins has a temper. Like
Mm-hmm.
he's not this like I think everyone has like Phil Lamar's voice
Yeah.
in their head and they just like think, yeah. But I'm like, did you watch the cartoon even?
Right.
Virgil Hawkins kind of has like a mean streak a little bit. Like
Right.
he says like slick shit sometimes. I'm like,
Yeah.
there's a point where he was losing his temper.
Mm-hmm.
There's an episode where I could go down. Listen, there's one of them where I think he's feeling himself too much,
Yeah.
and then like Daisy gets hurt,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just like I think it was Rubber Bandman had to tell him to like chill out, and it's just
Yeah.
like you need to stop,
Mm-hmm.
It's just like and then there's a point where in the cartoon where his father is kidnapped.
Yeah.
Virgil was out there just smoking everybody, like trying to
Right.
get his dad. He's like,
Yeah.
where, what did you do? And he's like
Yeah.
zapping like Puff and everybody else. And it's just like, he was not about the fun and games at all. Like
Yeah. Nah. Even in the comic, like even before he gets his powers, right? Like before he even gets his powers, like he's got a mouth on him. Like that's how like we want to say, oh, he's been bullied. His mouth got him into that, you know? And then, he's like, oh, I guess we can claim it was a bad influence. It gives him the gun. But he still had a gun and went to a gang fight.
You know what I'm gonna do about this, Francis? I'll tell you what. I have a few words for Francis.
Right.
This isn't really,
So yeah, man. Nah. So that what you do in season 2 is necessary. It's heartbreaking, but necessary. I think the part that had me upset though, when you posted the picture on Twitter after dropped, I was like, oh, okay. I see how it is.
It was just that innocent. It's like, oh, you motherfucker.
Right. Just twist the knife. Why don't you?
Yeah, I was because I knew that people that had read it were just like, oh, he ain't right for that.
Right.
But it was like, and the thing that I love is that I heard a lot of people that were reviewing it saying like, oh man, this character, had such potential. This character grew on me. I really liked this character. Oh, this character was wow, this was so sudden. And I'm like, exactly.
Yeah.
That's exactly what happens. That's exactly what it feels in real life. Because, in season 1, we say, he went to that protest and he was like affected by like, the students and classmates and everything. But we never really, it didn't really feel as personal as it should have. You know what I mean?
Right. And because he went to the protest to impress the girl.
Yeah.
Right? But this brings it home. Like now he's got a vested interest in all the consequences of the Big Bang.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it was a lot, but if we can just segue really quick, we just feel like we just ended up like spoiling the book. Ebon was so fun to write. The one regret that I have, and that's only because some issues, it was going to be a little bit longer, but some issues got cut, is that I wanted to delve deeper into the relationship between Adam and Ivan. I really was trying, because you mentioned like parallel. I was trying to show the parallels between like just brotherhood, and like I was really trying to set that up. And there was a whole bit in there with Ivan's father that I didn't get to execute that I wish that I could have. If I had gotten another issue. There was more I wanted to delve deeper into. So because I like anime, and it was obviously going to be one of those things where there were ideals that Ivan's father had that he saw in Virgil. It kind of made him like look at it, because like his whole perspective is like, why are you being a hero, or why are you trying to save these people that don't care about us?
Right.
Don't care. Like, why are you caping so hard for them? Every time someone tries to be a hero, things go wrong.
Yeah.
So there was so much more there, and I wish I could have, done. Some of my friends, we joke around, it's like, release the Ivy cut.
Yeah. Because now that you said it, I need to see it. Right? Like, I need to know that Racer X is actually Speed Racer's dead brother. Like, I need that now. But so yeah, all right. So before we move on to like what you're doing now, right? Vita Ayala,
Yes.
right? Vita somehow doesn't get the respect that they deserve, right? Like, if I have to describe Vita as I've heard them described by others, it's they're like the fairy god sibling of comics. Like, there are so many people that have kind of come in after Vita, and Vita's kind of been like, hey, here's how you're gonna do it. And there's a lot of like trial by fire, and it's like, oh no, you write that. Like,
oh my God,
my name will be on the book, but yeah, you got this, do it.
Yeah.
How is it working with Vita?
Vita, oh man, it's so crazy because, first of all, I love Vita very much. Vita is like, on paper, we should not mix. On paper, we should not get along. On paper, we should not work well together. On paper, this book should have gone up in flames. Depending on who you ask, probably did. But the point is, it should have gone up. And yet, somehow, it worked perfectly. Like, somehow, I feel like the way that we work we're so different, but it creates balance. You know what I mean? Because Vita will do that thing where Vita likes to write and likes to be a writer, and I'm like, Vita, we need cool things to happen. We need action. And then for me, I'm like, and then this is gonna happen, and that's gonna happen. This is gonna be a cool fight scene, and blah blah blah. And it's like, hey, pacing, and we need a beat here. We need to. Okay. So Vita hates this comparison, but this is so true. It's like, I see Vita as like the older sibling that's like has like the poise and the elegance, and then very much like in an interview that's like, yes, and that's the reason we decided to do this, blah blah blah. Meanwhile, it cuts to me, and I'm the kid with like the action figures. It's just like,
right.
Like, but I think, working with Vita, they're gonna push you, and they are gonna tell you like, hey, you're gonna do this, you're gonna do that, and they're gonna want to talk to you, and they're also gonna want their space when they're doing their thing. But at the same time, I think I've learned a lot from Vita, and there are some things that, even though I have learned these things from Vita, I'm going to unlearn them so I can do my own thing. You know what I mean? It's like, at the end of the day, this is all very helpful, but this is also, I have to write how I want to write, and I have to do it how I would do it. Not how Vita would do it. And that's what Vita would encourage. It's like, well, just do you, but make sure it's good.
Yeah.
And that's always cool. I mean, it's so funny because like, there would be times where we would get along, and we do. And then there are times where it's like, there's like 90% of the time we get along. Oh my gosh, that 10%. Like, when that 10% comes up, we don't.
Yeah.
It's like, It's like just like the lightning just like goes like, oh, it shouldn't be like, and it's not like we don't hate each other or anything like that. Like that's not, I
Yeah.
don't want to put that out there. But there are certain like narrative choices
Mm-hmm.
will make them like, I wouldn't have done it that way. And there are certain things that I do that they're like, no, there needs to be a caption here. And I'm like, no, that's not it.
Mm-hmm.
One of the biggest like fights, they'll probably kill me for talking about this, but it wasn't really a fight. It was just like a creative differences, you
Right.
know. But it was a scene. It was a scene in Shadows of Dakota
Yep.
where Virgil is talking to his mom
Mm.
in a scene that I had in my head for forever.
Right.
And originally in that scene, it was actually going to be him and Sharon talking,
Mm-hmm.
but we end up changing that to like something for season one, and then this it made more sense to make it for him and his mother speaking,
Right.
Jean. That was what we were going to do. But there was a moment where I wanted Virgil to be so overwhelmed with what happened that he just froze and he just
Mm-hmm.
couldn't speak. And it's a page where there's no dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember Vita being like, no, there needs to be a dialogue. There needs to be something here. Like she should say something. I was like, no, this is a moment that we've all been through where we've all been so sad that all you can do is just sit there,
Mm-hmm.
feel it. And I'm like, I want the readers to feel that page. I want them to feel like they're there with Virgil.
Right.
And we went back and forth about this
Mm-hmm.
for weeks. And it was just like, oh. And then eventually, I got the victory in that. And I was like, yes. And people, I remember when people like reviewed it, it's like, oh man, there's this one page where it's just, I was like, yes, exactly. But there are times also where Vita will write something so much better than I could have said it. Like there's times, like there was an issue, I think it was it's Static and Ebon.
Mm-hmm.
It's like that the big like, crazy fight that happens.
Yeah.
There's a dialogue that Static has where he's talking about something that he's grieving and how it won't be used against him.
Mm. Yes.
That shit was so good that I cried reading that. I was just like,
Yeah. Yeah.
Like it was so like it's so cool. Like when Vita and I are like in sync, really, like that's when like the best stuff comes out. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, that sequence is like, I don't know, like watching Gohan, like
yeah, it's
right
funny.
before he like
Gohan's my favorite Dragon Ball Z character.
Word, we have that in common. And they punked Gohan anyway.
Yeah,
so
they brought him back. No, he's back to being what he should be now. So that's good.
Nice. But that's what that's like watching him just all beat up and then just like, but nah, you about to get this work though.
Yeah. There's a lot of Gohan and Static for sure. Like when yes,
there's a lot of Gohan in that Static number 7B cover.
Which one is that?
That is let me find it. I need to buy that cover.
Is that the one with him and Ebon?
Yes.
Yeah.
That is that picture of Gohan that we've all been drawing since 7th grade.
Yeah, and that's good that artist picked up on that because like in the concept art, even when I drew his hair, I based it off of Gohan. Like that, I wish I could have. I wanted to get that cell saga, like the red line, like I wanted to get that in there, but there was no page space to do. Damn it!
Right,
there's too many things I want to do.
That's crazy. Okay, so again, go buy Static Shadows of Dakota. It's out everywhere. If you haven't bought Static Season 1, that's discounted on Amazon, so you can grab that as well. They're both great reads. Shadows of Dakota is my favorite, but hey, I'm not going to tell you what to read. But so you're done with Static, right? For
now, there, I might come back for something else. Maybe.
Okay, so
might involve a character from the future or in the future.
So, and that's a question that came from the audience that I probably should ask. But you did do in the 30th anniversary special,
Exactly.
there was the Static Beyond
Hmm.
story. And we get to see future Static like we saw him in the animated series. And we learned in that show that Static ended up being like the greatest hero ever. Uh which was random, but then it's not, I guess, because Dwayne was writing it. But no, Static is like the greatest hero of all time, and he's showing us how the end of the world went or whatever. But anyway, you draw this and wrote this short story, just Static assisting Batman Beyond with something like kind of being his Piccolo, if we want to call it that. And that was dope. For one, how was it getting that story approved? I'm assuming that's something you pitched.
It was something I pitched. Yeah, I knew right away. It's like, well, you only got X amount of pages. And I was like, okay.
Mm,
And I'm like, well, how can I make this feel like the show and do my own thing, but say something that, might be encouraging both
mm,
to myself and to someone that reads it,
mm,
And that was kind of the idea. And I was also like, oh, you get to have a chance to show just how OP Virgil is.
right.
And that was what I really wanted. I was like, nah, Virgil in the future, Virgil's that dude. Virgil
Yeah.
is that dude. And like that was the main thing. I was like, nah, Virgil's gotta be the coolest, like just the coolest guy. You gotta make him like super cool. You can't half-ass it.
Yeah.
So what does that look like? And then when I pitched it to Dennis, I was like, can Static, oh, I don't know, completely rearrange someone's like molecules and blah 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 and this, that, and the third and do it. And he's like, yeah. Like the way that he did it today, it's like, yeah, he can do that. Yeah. I was like, okay. And I had talked to Joe Illidge as well about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, he can do that. And Joe was like, no, people don't understand how strong Virgil Hawkins actually is.
Mm,
Even Cross had told me that.
yeah.
He was like, no, he is the strongest character in the Dakota universe. Like,
Mm,
there is a reason. The only thing that's his weakness is his ignorance of that power because he does not know how strong he is yet.
right.
But he's insanely powerful.
Mm,
Almost to the point where it's like he's broken almost. Like
yeah.
he's pushing it. If you really get into it, you can start getting into like some like Dr. Manhattan levels of like power with
Mm,
Virgil. People don't know that. People just kind of look at Static and think, oh, okay, he's a black boy with electric powers and he just zaps things, and that's
right.
like he's so much stronger than that. And doing that with Batman Beyond, first of all, I love Batman Beyond.
Mm,
Like I love Terry McGinnis.
mm,
I love that he's like snarky Batman. Like it's basically just like Spider-Man, but it's
right.
like I thought that was cool. And
Mm,
I'm like, how can I gotta find a way to get this in here. And I pitched it to Marquise and Dennis, and they were like, okay. And I was like, and it was fun. I would like to answer that question that I know is
mm,
I would like to return to that, to Static Beyond. Like there
mm.
is something I have in my head, but we'll see, rent is getting pretty high. I might have to come back and do something.
That's hilarious. Because the question I had, I don't really have any notes for this conversation, but one question I did have, right? Your time on Static seemed bittersweet, right? And maybe because we're just watching the tweets in real time,
Yeah.
and uh, being an artist is difficult. Being an artist where your work is critiqued on a weekly basis, it is difficult, right? And so by the time Static was over, it felt like you were just like, I'm so glad I'm done with this, and I never want to see these people again.
Well, I won't say that. I was glad to be finished with
Mm,
that book. I was
mm,
glad to finally be able to like to put it to rest. And I was glad that it ended on like a pretty good note.
mm,
It's just obviously when you're working on, I think any production, there's gonna be ups and downs, and you're gonna
yeah.
be like, oh, I have no idea how we're going to pull this off.
Yeah.
And it was tough. It was a very tough book. Like it was just a lot of, it's like, and I think the reason why Shadows of Dakota hurt just a little bit more is because that story really, really meant something to me. And I didn't care what anybody else really thought. I was just like, I want to make this the best that I could. So it would frustrate me when there were times where, you know, stuff would either be like pushed back or we couldn't move forward on certain things. We had to wait, probably add something. And it's eating up time. It was just eating up time. And the time I would have to do like really strong work, like I feel like the first and second issue, I was like kind of in my bag. I was like, okay. And it was just like, hey, you know, they were gonna knock it down because it was like 8 issues. It was gonna be 8 issues. I had written it to be 12 issues, and then we had set it down for it to be 8 issues. It was like, well, we're not gonna get that 8 issue. We're gonna knock it down to like 6 issues. And I was like, you can't tell this story in 6 issues and it's satisfying. And it was kind of like, well, the only way you're gonna be able to do it is if you were to somehow rush through issues 3, 4, and 5, or it's like I had to like rocket through all of these issues to get it to where it can like get it to 7. So that's why some of the art feels a bit rushed in a lot of areas, because it was just like I gotta do this, otherwise I'm not gonna be able to tell this story. And that was more important to me, was telling the story.
Yeah,
like, I was like, yeah, the art, fine. It's like some of your worst stuff is still someone's best. Just go.
So why did issue 8 get cut? Was it a sales issue? Was it like a publishing schedule thing?
It was a schedule thing. It had nothing to do with sales. It had nothing to do with like it's not popular or anything like that. It was purely because of like scheduling. And it was difficult because there were things that we needed, that, again, those mandates I told you about, something we want you to put inside of the book.
Yeah.
And try to fit it all in there. And it was like, it was really, 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 really tough, because there was a character that they wanted in here, but there's this whole thing with like rights and so, but we couldn't move forward. Because we couldn't move forward, that time just kept eating away. And then once, it was like, okay, we're trying to draw it. You draw this character in there, and they're like, oh, actually, we can't use that character. So change the hair color of this character and need you to kill that character off in like the next issue and then move. And we're just like, okay. So in doing that, this is part of it. So you're like, okay. And what made me upset about it, I'm like, the time that we spent on this piece could have been spent on the actual story, the main narrative.
Yeah.
Why is this here? Like, I get, like, luckily, Vita is there and I'm there. We were able to like tie it together and make it still flow within the narrative and still make it impactful.
Yeah.
It was very difficult. And it was like, okay, we're going to get through this. But I just wish that, we didn't have to do those things. That way I could have had more time. I could have made the artwork the way that I really, really wanted to. Like that first issue, like I was there. I was like, yo, I'm gonna draw this. I'm gonna draw the fuck out of this book. Like I was feeling it. I was really feeling it.
Yeah.
And I got rushed and I'm like,
yeah, I think my words were, this looks like a movie.
Yeah. And that was the feel. I wanted it to feel like that.
Yeah.
And I think some parts I was able to kind of pick up the slack. I think in issue like 7, issue 6 was still pretty cool. But the cool thing is that issue 6 was something where we were like, okay, we need to find a way to explain all this backstory and do all this stuff and do all the bells and whistles that we were gonna do. But we have to do it in one issue. We got to find a way. And it's like, oh, make it this kind of fight.
Right.
And that was how we did. And it was like, well, let's tie that also into like brain waves and electro, like, that was how we were able to do it and make it more like, I was like, okay, I did it. Let's get the next one. Writing is hard. That's
For sure. Listen, all I do is review books. You couldn't get me to write a script.
It's tough. It's really hard because especially when everybody cares and everybody has like good intentions, it's like, okay, well, this is the hand we're dealt.
Yeah.
That's of it, But for the most part, people seem to have liked it, and that's what matters the most, I think.
It was Shadows of Dakota. I gotta look at the shelf and make sure I'm not lying. Shadows of Dakota is my favorite since Milestone came back.
Damn. Thank you.
It's that, it's Blood Syndicate, it's Hardware Season 1.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes those are like 2A and 2B. But Shadows of Dakota is dope. It's dope.
That means a lot because I'm not gonna lie, I was scared because I would see like your reviews, and there's one guy, I think it's like Black Mastodonte. Yeah. I've been waiting to hear what his review for Shadows of Dakota is. He hasn't. He did, like, he started off with one and then he just never talked about it afterwards. I'm like, did he not like it? He's just like busy. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it would give me energy hearing your words and hearing his words. Kind of like be like, okay, this is who. And I can't even forget
Ernie.
Fear. Like he would give the most coverage of Static.
There were so many times where I wanted to do a video. Yeah. And I made the mistake of watching his first. And I'm like, there's nothing I'm going to say that's better than that.
Yeah. It's funny because he would say something and I was nervous because it's like he wasn't a fan of Ebon at first. I remember the video, he's like, oh, they do Ebon. I'm not really a fan of this character, like Ebonics, blah, blah, blah. And by the time that book was finished, he's like, I love this iteration of Ebon. And I was just like, yes! Got you.
Nah. Ernie's videos on Milestone in general are great.
Yeah.
But he's got the whole, like, I'm gonna recap the issue thing, like working for him. I'm like, I can't do that for every issue. I don't know how that man pumps all those things out like that.
He's so enthusiastic about it too. Like it just makes you like, okay, I feel good about this, But overall, when I look back and I look at, this book here, I can't help but be proud of it. You know what I mean? Like, a lot of effort went into this, and is it perfect? No, what is? But it's mine. It's, and it meant something, and like nobody can take that away. You know what I mean? Right. It meant something to me, and hopefully it means something to the readers when they get it. I hope that people will like give it a chance and read it and be like, oh, I was expecting one thing and this ended up being a completely different, vibe. It's going to be crazy. Again, not confirming anything, but it's going to be crazy. I think years later, like when I'm doing something else and, everybody's moved on, whatever. And when we finally get like a Static movie or a Static whatever, and they're like, oh, they're going to be pulling from, this, that, and Shadows of Dakota. And just be like, oh, they're doing that storyline?
Word. Listen, if they made Shadows of Dakota a movie, like, bro, that's crazy to even think, right? Because there's not that many Static stories. They've got to pull on it. Like,
well, there's still a comic, like the original comic.
Yeah, I mean, there's 45 issues of the original Static. I just mean, like, how like when there's like Batman, it's like, oh, they can do the Long Halloween or Year One or blah, 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 right?
Yeah.
There's not a ton of like stand-up, like, well, Static is written in the 90s when like every arc is standalone, right? But some of it in the comic definitely does kind of feel like villain of the week type stuff. And then they did like big crossovers. So it's like you almost can't do a Static movie. You got to do a Milestone movie, right? But with these new arcs, it's like, nah, you can focus on the character and just really build around them. And then if you want to bring in the greater universe, you absolutely can. That's dope. But okay. So you're off static for now. I guess you're leaving that door open. I'll leave it open too. Although I've already made peace with the fact that I'm not gonna see Nick Draper-Ivey drawing static again.
It might be a minute. It might be a minute. I won't say never again. I mean, because I still think there is something to explore with Virgil in the future. And I think there's some cool things. And I'm like, I still want to see, what does Ebon look like
Yeah.
in the future? What's that gonna be? That's there's something in my head that I'm like, ooh, because remember how it ended.
Mm-hmm.
My perfect in the perfect world, it would be Static season 1, Static Shadows of Dakota, and then this Static Beyond kind of thing. That, oh, this fills in the gaps of
Right.
like, and that would be my perfect
It's your Dark Knight trilogy.
Yeah, my trilogy of these is like, okay, that's how you read it,
Or so okay. So let's say this is it. Let's say this is your legacy on Static, right? What does it mean to you? Right? Like you brought Static back.
Did I? I mean, I feel like honestly, it wasn't just me. There was a bunch of people. There's Dennis, there's Reggie, there's Vita, there's Marquis, there's Chris Conroy, there's Chris Cross, and then there's me. There's a team of people, better or worse, brought this thing back. And, it means something to people. Oh, Kari Randolph, he did the covers for season 1. How can I forget that? And all the artists that came in and did like variants and everything and like believed in it. So I feel like I have to distance myself from it because right now I'm too close to it, and I have to just put it out there and go and do other things.
Yeah.
People come back and they'll be like, oh man, he did a Static run like when he was much younger.
Right.
You guys ever read that? And I'll be like, and I'll be 50 something and someone's still gonna come up to me and be like, did you sign this Shadows of Dakota book? And I'm like, oh.
I'm excited. First of all, shout out to my man Tim. He caught you at New York Comic Con and got me that Static print.
Yeah.
I was excited about that. I'm actually coming to New York Comic Con this year. That's good.
Oh, dope. We get to meet. That's cool.
Yes. I got my flight booked. So what now?
I said, God willing.
Right.
We get to meet.
So, okay. So yeah, you're right. There's a lot of people involved with bringing Static back. I think being able to sort of redefine Static visually at the very least.
Okay.
Like that's dope. That's dope. And the fact that you've done it so early in your career, like you said, is also it's dope. But that leads me to what you're doing now. What's next?
What is next? Survive. Survive. No,
pay these bills.
Right now, I'm trying to get something off the ground. Well, I have a few ovens in the fire. There's a graphic novel series that I'm trying to do, like this gnashing of teeth thing. I'm trying to get that off the ground and get all the legal stuff taken care of that so I can do that. There's some stuff I'm doing with like Japan that I can't quite go too far into. But I'm working, and then everybody, because I know everybody's like asking me about Dream Vesper. That's not off the table. It's just I'm very particular about how I do stuff. And as I told you, I had to take on other projects to I had to do Exogenesis. I had to do, I had to do a bunch of other things, commissions, what have you. and I just could not sit in a spot financially where I could be comfortable and just make this thing.
Yeah.
You know? And now I'm like getting closer to where I can probably do that, because I know some people want me to do Dream Vesper, and I'm like, I want to do that. I have not forgotten it. It's just I'm I'm talking to people right now about it and how to approach it and how to release it and all of that. But these things take time. I need people to really, really understand that. And it's like, I don't want to just put something out there and it not go anywhere. Like, I'm like very particular about how I'm going to release it and who I release it with.
Yeah.
Outside of that, I think in the immediate future, it's really me trying to get this gnashing of teeth thing off the ground, and this project with like Japan that I have going on. Like that's those are the immediate things outside of like survival. And as for DV, I have a meeting about that soon. So I'm trying to do it. Like,
Nice. So as this interview releases, the Black History Month covers, DC does this dope thing where they'll get one artist to do a bunch of variants for Black History Month. Yeah. Last year it was Alexis Franklin, I think was her name. And those were dope. She had this painted art style. I bought them all. And then this year it's you. And I mean, you drew Nubia and John Stewart and 6 other people that I can't think of right now. How was that doing those covers?
Some of them were more fun to draw than others. There were some where I was like, I have no idea I'm going to do this. Like Cyborg, I still think the best Cyborg that I've drawn is that first one for I think it's from,
I think it's issue 1.
Yeah, that Cyborg, I still haven't. I think that's like the coolest Cyborg I've ever drawn. And then I did the second one, and then I think the Batwing I really, really liked. Like, for some reason, people really like that one too. Like, because of wings.
Yeah.
And then the Flash cover I really enjoyed drawing. I'm trying to think who else was there. The Green Lantern was cool too. The John Stewart was cool. A lot of those covers were cool. Like, it was just some of them were easier to draw and more fun to draw.
Yeah.
Just like, how am I gonna make this?
They're all dope. I think if I've got to pick favorites, I'm just scrolling through them right now. I like Natasha Irons. I like the Flash cover. I think Cyborg's dope. Batwing is better, but I think Cyborg's dope. But that Mr. Terrific with the glowing tees.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
That's dope.
I can tell you just how much I've been drawing that I'm just sitting here and I'm like, oh yeah, that one. Forgot.
That's crazy, man. Nah, but no, these are dope. Okay. So yeah, I pre-ordered them all at my shop, as if I needed to spend more money. But hey, is what it is. You got to do it. And all right, this is completely off topic. How do you feel about these like big 2 Black people anthologies? Like, I got DC Power next to me somewhere. Marvel Voices came out this week, and it's just like, I like them. On one hand, I like them because whoever edits these anthologies, especially for DC, they put some really awesome teams together, right?
Yeah.
Like, so you get writers and artists that you just don't always see. Like, they might be doing covers.
Which cover is that?
This is, who did this cover?
You see?
I gotta look it up.
Is that the Chase Conley one? It is Chase. Yeah, that's Chase.
Yes.
I don't even have that yet.
So yeah, there was this cover. There was Jamal Campbell did one, and then Dennis did one, for the 2024 DC Power. But yeah, on one hand, like I enjoy them because it's like, okay, we get characters. One, we don't see these characters, for the other 11 months of the year, so that's cool. And again, the creative teams are always dope. Like Edwin Galman's doing a story in here. They got Brandon Thomas and Kari Randolph doing the story. So it's like all that's cool, right? But it does kind of feel like, hey, this is what we would do if we cared about you, Black people, as customers. And then that'll have to do until next year. Like, how do you feel about these?
You're trying to get me in a lot of trouble.
That's not the goal. I promise it's not the goal.
You're going to get me into a lot of trouble, and DC will never hire me for anything else ever again.
If we got to cut it out, say
no,
just in case. Nick said he loves you all very much, and he's very excited about these anthologies.
No, it's like we all know, we all know what time it is. It's just like, okay, we got to get the obligatory, Black History, gotta release Static, Black History Month. We gotta, and it's, you get it. We all know we're not new to this. They're gonna do. This is the thing is, if they didn't release anything on Black History Month, we probably say, why haven't they released anything on Black?
Right. So ain't no Black people on the wall, Sal.
Yeah. So I mean, you just read the comics and just kind of smile and be like, thank you. Be nice if we got this all the time. Which, I mean, I think we do, but they don't. I'm going to just go ahead and say it. DC does not. They do not. People knew about Static coming out because I talked about it. That should tell you. It's like, otherwise people would kind of be like, when does this come out again? I'm like,
yeah.
I marketed that book super crazy. I marketed that book more than DC. That book,
no, you know what was crazy to me? Last year was Milestone's 30th anniversary, and there was no like Comic-Con panel, nothing. Like, some books came out, and that it just kind of came and went, and I was like,
I think they announced. I think they announced that I was doing that at Comic-Con. Like, I think that was like the thing where I was on the Jim Lee and Friends, and I think I want to say, I want to say it was the Static stuff, and then there was also the Static Beyond thing.
Yeah.
I remember the audience being like super excited about that, and just, ooh, that was cool.
Still, but yeah. Anyway, I think Marvel does a tad better at just keeping their characters out, all year long. But like DC's got Black people that I forgot existed, and then it's like, oh, Black History Month. Here's Bumblebee. Where's she been? I don't know, right? But anyway, I digress. It's a topic for a different conversation. But I just
fired.
Fired. But so Shadows of Dakota is out now. Go buy that so we get more. And that is it. Icon versus Hardware is done. So season 2 of Milestone is done. Do you know anything about season 3?
No. I knew what you're gonna ask me. Yeah. I knew what you're gonna ask me. Do you know anything about season? I do not. I don't know anything about it. And the thing is, I specifically wrote it in a way to where I wanted it to be open close, but I also wanted to leave that a little bit open-ended to where whoever comes next, they can kind of, play with it and do it. I didn't want to interfere too much with that, because even when it came down to like Ebon as a character, there were key notes that I had given. Where I was like, Ebon must have Black Air Force energy at all times. Like, I do not want this to turn into my cuddly friend Ebon. Like, yeah, and now we're pals. No.
Right. Right. We don't get like he's sympathetic to the point that he needs to be, so we understand where he's coming from.
Yeah, but he can always come back. It's being terrifying.
Right.
Like that's on purpose, you know. So, we'll see. I don't know what they're gonna do with season three, if there is a season three. I mean, I know DC has plans for other things, but I can't speak on that. I finished the book. I'm just like, okay, and the thing is, I'm not even really worried. I feel like when they come back, whoever they get to do it, it's gonna be so well received. Like, I think whoever they get to do the static book after me, it's gonna be so popular, and it's gonna be those things where people will be like, finally, like it'll. I feel like my book is like in that Amazing Spider-Man kind of thing. Like, it's this had to happen so this thing could happen. And that's kind of how I look at it. It's like people might be like, oh, that's just kind of, and then I come back years later and be like, heck,
Right.
hopefully, or maybe it'll be the opposite where people will announce that I'm doing another book and someone will groan and the audience is like, oh,
Him again.
I
Thought we were rid of this guy.
hate this.
All right. Look, so we could do this all night. You
Yeah,
got food to eat.
I do. It's sitting here looking at me and I'm looking at it.
Right. So tell the people real quick just where they can find you, where they can follow you to see what's next.
You can follow me on my Instagram. It's just Nikolas Draper-Ivey, NikolasDraperIvey, all one word. Or you can follow me on Twitter, which is just Nick Draper-Ivey, which is NikDraperIvey. You can do all that. Or you could just not follow me at all and just go on with your life. That is also an option, but that's where you'll find me. I don't really post too many, like, I try not to post too many depressing tweets anymore. Like, I'm not really depressed, like, plus my girlfriend will just she'll never allow me to do that. Like,
Right.
she's like that. It's like that, the Barack and Michelle Obama meme where he's on the phone and she just comes up and just takes the phone. I was like,
Right.
you know. Also, I have no reason to be depressed. Tekken 8 just came out. Any aggression or any pent up frustration I have can just be taken out in Tekken.
Right.
Just play Tekken. But yeah, that's usually where they can find me. Me draw my own stuff for a little bit and probably some commissions and things that I enjoy. Just kind of get back in the swing of things. But yeah.
Dope. Well, I will leave all of his information here in the show notes and the description of the video, whichever video. We're probably just doing clips and stuff because who wants to sit and watch me talk to anybody for an hour? But I'll leave all that information down below. And now I'm going to stop recording so I can ask all the juicy questions I couldn't ask on camera. But yeah, thank you all for watching, for listening. Thank you, Nick, for taking time to speak with us. And I'm excited for what's coming next, man.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
No problem at all.